All right, guys, so just like I mentioned to you yesterday, we are about to start our next unit where we focus more heavily on the use of value and how to draw realistically, and we really improve our attention to detail and our drawing skills. So, just like I talked about when we started our line unit, we are going to take a more zoomed in look at each element. So the one that we are doing now, because we just wrapped up line, is like I said, value. So remember, value is essentially shading or the transition of lights to darks. And what you're gonna need for today's activity and the tutorials that you're gonna do are, you will need a regular pencil, so your just regular drawing pencil that you have in your art kit. You will need your ebony pencil, which you also have in your art kit. And then you will be getting a charcoal pencil, which is what this, it looks like this. It says General Charcoal on it from me, or they'll be in the middle of your table, depending on where we have them for class. They might be on the counter though, so make sure you ask or look around. Then you will also need your white eraser. You will be getting 2 different sheets. So you will be getting 2 of these value practice sheets because you will use one for charcoal and one for ebony. So we're gonna start with our ebony, and once we get down into this section, I'll show you guys a little bit more vocabulary that we need to pay attention to. But before we get started, I just wanna explain how this paper will work. So you will be using this paper, and you'll be creating different value scales, and then you will be figuring out and learning where or how to make a shape look 3D based on where the light's coming from, and then you'll draw your own shape and pick your light source and do all of that in a moment. So to start, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with ebony. So on your very first paper, you will need to write your name. And then write, just right next to this, write down ebony. Okay, so show me you're working with your ebony. So again, value is the amount of lightness and darkness an object possesses. And then the instructions for this first section of boxes, the ones that are divided up into individual boxes, says create 8 different values by applying pencil pressure and go from the lightest, which is white, to the darkest, which is black. So that means that this first one is going to stay white, so we're not going to touch that one at all. And then this next one will be the darkest dark we can get with this pencil. Now, my favorite way to go about this is, well, I guess I have 2 favorite ways. So one of my favorite ways to go about this is to simply layer. So start with a light pencil like this, and then you can simply layer on top of it to make it darker. Another way that you can do this is if you apply a different amount of pressure with your pencil from start to finish or in different areas. So right now I'm doing a really light pressure, like I'm barely pressing down. Notice how it's pretty light. Then I'm gonna slowly add a little bit more pressure, and then eventually I'm gonna be pressing down pretty hard, not hard enough to break the lead of the pencil, but notice how it goes from light right there to dark, okay? And the same thing will go with our charcoal. Once you get into that, you can start with a lighter pressure, and then as you move, you can add more, and then add more, and it'll get really dark. So to start, what I would do is I would, on this first scale, I would just continue to layer the values as you get darker. So since we're not touching this one because it's gonna stay white, I would just start by lightly laying in a value here, okay? Try to keep it neat. So honestly, that's probably a little dark. So it might be a good idea for you to start with the darkest value. So this one's a little dark, so I'm gonna come in and erase a little bit. You should try to not do that. So that's a little dark. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna move to this side. So it's probably a good idea, again, I just wanted y'all to see that, but it's probably a good idea for you to start on the darkest side. So I'll start by layering some. Okay. And then I'm gonna layer it again, and notice how dark I can get, right? So you can get pretty dark as you layer it. Okay, do it again. So keep in mind, as you're going through these, you're going to want to continue to draw in the same direction like I'm doing. And you are also going to want to make sure that there is a gradual and consistent transition. So that means you're not going to go from this to a super light one, right? You're going to stay at this one, and honestly, you could probably layer another one with that until it gets to the darkest ebony pencil mark that you can get, okay? And then I'm gonna go down to this next one, and so you want it to be just a little bit lighter. So same thing, you can either do the pressure or layer it like I'm doing, whichever feels more natural to you or which one you feel like you do best. So if you need to practice in your sketchbook a little bit, you totally can. So, okay, so that's pretty good. So now I'm gonna continue down this scale all the way, either layering or applying different amounts of pressure. Okay, so now that I have this done, pretty good. I see some areas that I could have definitely improved on for that first one. But now that I have these done and a clear transition of values, I'm gonna come down and I'm going to create a value scale by blending smoothly. So you might have noticed that I used the blending stick a little bit on these just to kind of clean them up a little bit because it bugs me when they're not nice and neat. But what you're gonna do on this one, this is gonna be extremely important for you to do that layering and also that pressure. So again, we're gonna start with lightest, which is white, to go to the darkest, which is black. So on this one, I'm gonna say start going light to dark. So I'm gonna pick just a little bit of an area and you're essentially mirroring what you did up here. So as you go, you're gonna want it to be pretty smooth. Take your time on this. The temptation is to get like real scribbly. Don't do that, not good. For this first one, I would really just layer in a consistent value throughout and then do a similar thing where you go and you add a darker value, darker, darker, and then come in and blend it. So y'all can kind of watch how I do it. Okay, now that I have those laid in, it's a good idea. This is when you can use your blending stump. One thing to keep in mind and be careful of is your blending stump is going to bring some of those values over. So I would just lightly do it and not get crazy when you get into the white part, but just do it smoothly. And just like with your pencil with the pressure, the blending stump is the same. So you can use more or less pressure and make sure you're keeping that clear transition, okay, of lights and darks and keeping it nice and smooth. Good. Okay. So now that I have that done, we're going to move on and talk about drawing shapes in a three-dimensional way. So we are going to talk about the anatomy of a shadow, or basically how a shadow is made up. So let's take a look at this drawing real quick. So we're actually going to be drawing one the opposite, but before we do that, the things that I want you to notice and I want you to see are the light source. So this light source is coming from the top right, which is coming down, and it's creating the highlight. So notice the whitest part right here, the highlight. Then the transitional light are really like these kind of mid-tones right here of the piece. And then we have the core of the shadow, which are the darkest parts, which are right in here. Then we have right here, this light spot, is actually called a reflected light. And that is a great spot to look at and see and recognize that some of the light is hitting off of this dark shadow, some of the light from this space right here, and bouncing back up to the shape. So that's gonna help it look really 3D and make it look a little bit more realistic when you're drawing things with that reflected light right there. The core of the shadow is the darkest part again, and then the cast shadow is the shadow being created by your figure or your shape from the light source. So keep in mind that the cast shadow is always on the opposite side of the light source. So looking at this and keeping this in mind, we are now going to create a shape right here. So our highlight would be right in here, our middle values or our transitional light will be right in here, the core of the shadow, reflected light, and then our cast shadow will be coming out this way. Okay. So I have pretty much all the parts of that ready to go and shaded. So some of it might be a little bit different. I might have some of that in there, but you can kind of tweak it and fix it as you see best. But just keep in mind that we need to be paying attention to the highlight, the mid values, the core of the shadow, and then the reflected light that's coming off of the surface that the circle is sitting on. So keep playing with it, do what you need to. Don't forget that you can use your blending stump to blend some stuff in a little bit more if you want to. Now what you're going to do is you are going to take what you learned right here, draw your own shape, a circle, a square, a triangle, whatever it might be, and you're going to pick the direction of your light. So do you want it coming from this side, from the left, or do you want it coming from the right? The next video will be about charcoal, and you will get to see how to do this same activity with charcoal.